The Friedrich Ebert Stiftung Foundation, in conjunction with the police, have organized a forum on ensuring peaceful elections in November. The forum brought together representatives of the various political parties, civil society organizations, and security agencies.
And a lot of property got up in flames and was destroyed. So it was a very, very dire period for that country. And I was there, fortunately not in the midst of the melee. But because of that, I think it is very pertinent that we revisit some of these issues around democracy, elections, and the prospect of violence. And to do that, I would like us to come back perhaps to one or two basic truths about democracy. The first truth that I think is very important is democracy surely is not a perfect political system. It is not a perfect political system. But at the same time, I firmly believe we haven't found a better one yet. And until we have not, we better make sure that democracy works. The second very important truth to my mind is that just as war is not just the absence of armed conflict, democracy is much more than just the conduct of elections without violence. Of course, violent-free elections are a centerpiece of every democracy, but democracy goes far beyond that. It is a way of life, and it needs to be carried by almost every citizen in any given society that describes itself as democratic. Ladies and gentlemen, I have not been, obviously I'm not Ghanaian, and I have not been in your country for a very long time. I'm almost completing a year here in Ghana. So I still have many more questions about Ghana and Ghanaian democracy than I can answer to date. And perhaps today you can help me answering the question, why are we debating this topic? Why are we debating the relationship between elections and violence in Ghana in the year 2016? And when I asked myself that question, I thought, maybe let me play a little quiz with myself. Now I'm going to play the quiz with you. So I'm laying out a few possible answers to this question, and maybe at the end of today's discussion, we will tick one or several of these answers as being correct. So the question on the table for me is, why are we debating the relationship between elections and violence in Ghana? Possible answer A. Because there are too many idle young men in Ghana who are ready to engage in violence and being paid for it. Option number B. We are debating the relationship between elections and violence in Ghana because there is not sufficient trust in the security agencies to do their job professionally and impartially. Option number C. There is not sufficient consensus in the society that the state should have the monopoly on the use of force. And finally, option number D. We are debating the relationship between elections and violence in Ghana because partisan politics are not exclusively perceived as a peaceful competition about the best concept for developing the country, but because partisan politics are perceived to be about full pockets and empty pockets. They are about winning or losing a very high stakes game, and thus people are much more ready to engage in these high stake games by not peaceful means. And finally, option number D, no, that was just D, option number E to this little quiz I put in front of myself. Among all the possible answers to the question, why are we debating the relationship between elections and violence in Ghana? So one possible answer is because all of the above. This is the quiz I played with myself, and as I said before, I was not able to answer the question, and I hope that this afternoon's debate will help me and will help you, will help all of us to perhaps come closer to answering this question and indeed to collect peaceful, successful elections at the end of 2016. I wish us this success and I wish us all good deliberations. Thank you very much for listening to me.
I am pleased to welcome you to this dialogue on political party, vigilante groups, and peaceful election 2016. The Center for Social Democracy, CSD Ghana, was founded some 4 years ago by a team of young professionals desirous of sharing ideas on national issues and preferring policy alternatives to shape public discourse and national development. Since its formation, we have focused on building a strong foundation for the organization, and we have done this with the support of Frederick Ebert Stiftung, FES Ghana, and with their support, we have developed a 5-year strategic plan focusing on promoting issues related to economic policy, social policy, governance, and youth development. We are grateful to you, Mr. Kopsika, for your support to CSD Ghana. Ladies and gentlemen, since its return to constitutional democracy in 1992, Ghana has made admirable progress towards democratic consolidation. The country is hailed among its peers in Africa as having successfully conducted 6 general elections that resulted in change in government from one political party to another. Some of these elections, like the 2008 elections, were closely contested, yet the outcome of the election was generally accepted by all parties involved. Even though Ghana's elections have been described by international observer missions as generally peaceful, free and fair, there have been reported incidents of violence. The phenomenon of vigilante groups within political parties has been a major feature of Ghana's elections under the Fourth Republic. Over the years, heavily built men, popularly known as macho men, associated with some political parties, engage in several activities such as snatching and sometimes burning of ballot boxes and intimidating voters during elections. Some of the popular names that come to mind are the Azoka Boys, Bamba Boys, Action Troopers, Invincible Forces, Bolga Bulldogs, to mention but a few. During the recently held Talensi by-elections, ladies and gentlemen, confirmed reports by security personnel revealed series of violent confrontations between vigilante groups suspected to be affiliated to the NDC and the NPP. There were also concerns from the general public that the failure of the police to prosecute people involved in election violence over the years has created a culture of impunity. Ladies and gentlemen, this roundtable discussion on political party, vigilante groups, and peaceful election 2016 has brought together the police, as we can see, the IGP represented here, political party representatives, security experts, civil society, and other interest groups in election to closely examine the phenomenon of vigilante groups and their implications for the 2016 presidential and parliamentary elections. It is the expectation of CSD Ghana and FES that stakeholders would dispassionately interrogate the issues and develop a roadmap for collaboration to ensure that the phenomenon of vigilante groups in elections is properly addressed to ensure peaceful elections. There is also opportunities for all of us here to make inputs into the discussion. We therefore invite all of you to enjoy every part of the discussion. And once again, we are happy that you have joined us. Thank you for coming.
We in this country consider elections as a sine qua non for democracy, a platform to ensure that the collective will of the people is translated into governance. Since then, we have forged ahead from defeating challenges, stuffed ballot boxes, bloated electoral registers, stolen ballot boxes, and violence before, during, and after voting, to elections that have been generally described as free and fair, and whose results have only been contested through the law courts. While applauding the reasonable progress we have made in our electoral politics, it is also critical to concede that as the payoffs from electoral victories seemingly expand, context for political positions have become more intense. In the process, we have been confronted by the phenomenon of political vigilantes and other forms of organized efforts outside legitimate channels to suppress or eradicate any threats to the status quo. with calls from all sections of the society for such vigilante groups to be disbanded, it can be reasonably suggested that there is a collective belief that political vigilante groups are antithetical to our democratic practice. This notwithstanding, it's also worth exploring the conditions that over the years have activated the rise and sustainability of these groups. The purpose of this presentation, therefore, is to discuss the phenomenon of political party vigilante groups and ways by which the police can collaborate with political parties and stakeholders to address the issue. Perhaps a good point to start our discussion is to consider the origins of this phenomenon. In some countries on the continent, the rise of vigilante groups have been ascribed to crime and the need to fight it outside of legitimate channels. In our own case, as Samuel mentioned, the phenomenon of vigilantism, particularly within the last 2 decades, can be traced to the development of personal security entourages for a variety of people, including religious leaders, businessmen, and politicians. Perhaps nowhere has the issue of vigilantism posed so many problems as within the land industry, where individuals and groups of individuals operating outside the legally prescribed domain of private security companies offer security services for the protection of land and landed property. Vigilante groups in Ghana have also been employed in the settlement of disputes. Ladies and gentlemen, before I go to the subject matter for today's discussion, it's important for us, given the trajectory presented, to acknowledge the fact that perhaps vigilante groups in this country provide a service. The legality or otherwise of this service, however, is what is in contention. Within our body politic, early manifestation of the phenomenon of vigilantes was in the form of macho men. Groups of heavily built individuals rented to ensure the maintenance or overthrow of the status quo through such acts as snatching and destroying ballot boxes and intimidating voters to generally creating insecure environments for electoral staff and representatives of political parties. So pervasive was this phenomenon of macho men that at some point, the concept of macho men for peace was floated to prevent others from snatching ballot boxes. While that idea was roundly rejected, it communicated at some point the acceptance of the pervasiveness of macho men-inspired activities in our politics. It's insightful to note that these macho men provided a service which was available to any politician who could pay. In other words, was not limited to any political party or politician. Then came the more streamlined form of vigilantism and the institutionalization of vigilantism in Azoka Boys, Bamba Boys, Bolga Bulldogs, Invisible Forces, Delta Force, and others. Groups that ostensibly have been put together to provide security to the political parties and politicians within the parties to which they belong. However, in practice, these groups are known to specialize in intimidation and harassment within and across party lines. The effects of the activities of these groups on the peaceful conduct of elections have generally been to create tensions before, during, and after the elections. In view of their negative impact on elections, the IGP has led calls that such groups should be disbanded. While this call emanates from sound analysis of the prevailing security situation in the country, it's important to remind ourselves that the underlying reason, or one of the underlying reasons for the emergence of these groups under discussion, is the express lack of faith and trust in the abilities of the security apparatus to address the concerns of some parties. And security professionals here gathered would attest to the fact that in matters of security, perception is as important, if not more important, than reality. So while the express lack of faith may not necessarily be the reality, it behoves on security institutions to create a level playing field to engender faith and trust from all concerned. In the absence of that, we go back to the basic rule of self-preservation, activated overtly or covertly, perpetrated impulsively, often with or without consciousness to the rule of law. As noble arbiters in the legitimate contest for political power, I believe it's the collective desire of all and sundry that our law enforcement officers will not just leave above reproach, but ensure that perceptions about their neutrality and professionalism are never questioned. In recent times, we have seen rising political temperature owing to intra or inter-party contestations. The various political vigilante groups are becoming more and more brazen and conduct themselves both in word and deed with a lot of impunity. It's therefore imperative that we join forces with our frontline security officials in identifying a sustainable solution to the challenge. Whilst commending the IGP, ladies and gentlemen, we must be mindful of the fact that disbanding the groups may not necessarily be the solution to the challenge. Dr. Agojo, is there any legal prohibition on the use of private security companies as escorts? Does the law allow the use of private security companies for VIP protection? Is it possible to use private security companies for the protection of assets and infrastructure, including offices and homes? If there are no such prohibitions, then my guess would be that we might see a proliferation of security companies that are nothing more than metamorphosed political vigilantes, now wrapped in the cloaks of legality. Ladies and gentlemen, would that necessarily address the fears that we have now? I do not think so. So I'd like to make a proposal, and I learned that this is supposed to be a discussion, so I'll table this proposal for our collective consideration. Now, this is the security establishment. Now, the suggestion is that instead of perhaps expanding the groups, we may need to begin a dialogue with the very owners of these groups, the political parties, so as to chart the way forward. My opinion would be that in the short term, political parties make known their recognized vigilante groups, and together we can agree a code of conduct to guide their actions. In the absence of this, when they commit a crime, it would be almost impossible to identify and rein them in. Now let me explain this. Now, under the present dispensation, there's an identifiable hierarchy. So you know Bamba boys obviously can be traced to a certain Bamba, and Azoka boys can be traced to a certain Azoka. And so there's an identifiable hierarchy. So when there are challenges, it would be possible to have an identifiable leader with whom to engage. Now, when the groups become disbanded, this may no longer be a possibility. Now, none of the groups mentioned are orphans. Their parentage is heavily related to our political parties. It's however important for our political parties to be reminded of the fact that a conflict-ridden electoral environment discredits the entire political process, irrespective of the winner. Ghana's political credentials within the Committee of Nations stems from the generally peaceful manner in which alternations in political governance have taken place. Whoever gets sworn in as president in 2017 would need this credential to back their legitimacy in the international system. You therefore have a responsibility, political parties and their representatives here, irrespective of your political colors, to contribute to the creation of a sane and safe political environment. And to ask the citizens, and may I here include our friends from the media, we will be ultimate beneficiaries of a peaceful political environment. We therefore have a responsibility to publicly and, more importantly, privately discredit the negative activities of political vigilantes. If we shame them publicly, yet applaud their efforts privately, we cannot address this challenge. As we evolve in our electoral fortunes, the payoffs have increased, so naturally there's a lot more to win and lose from electoral verdicts. While our proverbial peaceful Ghanaian tag may have chalked us some reasonable successes, even the uninitiated in politics wouldn't fail to recognize the increasing contestation of the electoral process, manifesting in the pre-election and even post-election environments. Our supposed religiosity may not hold up much longer. we need to be true to ourselves. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, our journey since the rebirth of democracy serves as a reminder of where we are coming from and where we can get to with dedication and perseverance. I pray we do get there. I thank you all for your attention.
I like to say that this is a very timely event, a discussion that is in vogue, and everybody would like to say something about it and hear something positive about it. On our part, we started this about a month ago, and the NDC here would testify to it that we have invited them. The NPP will also say the same thing, we've invited them, and all the youth groups of the political parties, we've had discussions with them. So Dr. Tukefio, your suggestion that we should go into some kind of dialogue is very important, and we have already started it. And as I speak now, we are scheduled to meet the PPP, the CPP, and other groups. The CPP and the PPP, we are meeting them this week, Thursday and Friday, and subsequent weeks we are going to meet other groups. So it is something we have started. The current police administration believes that much as we are talking about disbanding this vigilante groups, we have two-way approach. We can use the rod by way of using force, but we can also use dialogue, or we can also use both. Remember, in times like this, especially in an election year, the IGP is also the chair of the National Election Security Task Force, so he acts in two capacities, where he represents all the security agencies as well. And therefore, the recent operations and other things about vigilantes is only showing one side of us. When we are not pleased with certain activities, we use the rod. And if we want to also dialogue, we use dialogue. So we are using both approaches. And I think that together with all the institutions like this and other researchers and other people here, we will have a solution to it. So maybe to respond briefly to some of the comments or questions that you raised. There is a law in place. There is a legislative instrument in place as to how private securities should conduct themselves, how they should be formed, the things they can do, the things they cannot do, they are clear. And the laws are there for everybody to go according to those laws that we're talking about. A typical example is that their uniform should be prescribed by the Inspector General of Police. It is the law. It is not the Inspector General of Police who wrote it. The law states it categorically. And they must all, even last year, I think November, December, we had a forum with the private security organizations, and we had a lengthy discussion as to the things that they can do and things they cannot do. They cannot use any weapons. They can use those truncheons and certain things that they are prescribed to use and things that they are not allowed to use. So there are rules and regulations, and they are clear for people who are practitioners in those fields. Nobody in that field can pretend that they don't know anything about it. Otherwise, you don't have the business, you don't have any mandate to go into that business. And so the discussion here today is, how do we move forward as a nation? How do we move forward with vigilantes? We don't have the answers exclusively. Together, we can craft or come out with something very useful. Thank you very much, and these are my preliminary comments.
Every election period, we virtually sit on the tentacles, and the entire nation starts with that anxiety about the outcome and our fate during and after the election. I would wish to draw attention to some scientific and empirical origin as far as political party or election vigilantism is concerned. if we all can look back a bit from 1992, we will realize that this tendency about political vigilantism at the time of election was not so heightened as in 2012 and this coming election, 2012 and then probably 2016. We ask ourselves, what is the cause? Scientifically, I want to attribute it to what I call the presidential victory percentage. The presidential victory percentage. You will realize that at least in 1992, when the presidential victory was close to 58 or 59%, this kind of anxiety in 1996 wasn't so heightened. I'm saying so because at an election time, we can have two sources of pressure on the system. One is from the electorate themselves, and another one is the competition pressure that comes from the opposition parties. These two sources of pressure have heightened since 2012. And for me, empirically, I will attribute it to the consensus at even presidential victory. In 1992, just like I've referred to, we didn't see so much of this from 1992 to 1996, and even to the year 2000. It meant that, as far as the electorate was concerned, there was greater consensus building on the ground. It was much better because governance was deepened to the people or to the grassroots, and therefore the anxiety coming from the electorate wasn't so high. And when President Kufuor came, I think he also made it between 54 and 52, even though it wasn't as better as in the 8 previous years, but at least it wasn't so. 2012, when we had the parity, the virtual parity, vigilantism became a source of concern. 2012, we had, I think the presidential victory percentage was about 50.25%. And in this situation, if you do not deepen governance in a way that the well-being of the people is ensured, the very electorate turns out to develop undue anxiety and will be clamoring for change. And that was what happened in 2012. In fact, in 2012, it was no better. I think, 2008 rather was 50.25%. And if your government comes into power as such a very slim, lack of consensus building governance, then you need to do more to ensure that at least you can cater to the well-being of the electorate. If that does not happen, that pressure will build up among the people, including that of the opposition. And that is what heightens anxiety and then feeds into vigilantism. So in 2012, where were we? We had, is it about 50.7%? And we had the same thing. So what I'm saying in effect is that we must make sure that at least we face the bull by the horn and not think that at the end of a problem build-up, getting to electioneering time, we can come and talk about vigilantism and think that everything will be okay. The proper way to eliminate vigilantism is to ensure that at least we have inbuilt control system that ensures good governance. Good governance is the only antidote to ending vigilantism. Vigilantism is not a wishful thinking. And as a matter of fact, it goes back to our democracy. For now, we will see a lot of deficiencies in our constitution because reining in the executive in their excesses and violation of what I call justiciable prerequisite morality principles are very weak. They are very weak. Not until that is done, there will always be that anxiety. Thank you very much.
So, when we started this in around 92, these groups were not being called vigilante groups. I think this, what was common then, big able-bodied guys who were protecting individuals. In fact, the police will go very far. They can go as far as giving protection to presidential candidates. But what about parliamentary candidates? What about party executives? So we always normally will go with some people who, their jobs are to body protection and also crowd control. Sometimes when we are so very popular and everybody wants to touch you, somebody has to be in the middle of somebody. So these groups, as for ballot box snatching and all, these are things of the past. As the electoral system becomes okay, long ago, ballot boxes were carried to centers where votes were counted. That was where the idea about snatching the ballot box and changing it was prevalent. But what we do now, where just after voting, it is counted and pink sheets are developed and the results are given to 8 different people. What are you going to do with ballot box? So it's very rare. In fact, I've been telling Mike that 1 or 2 crazy people may want to snatch a ballot box and take it away and do what with it. Because if you take it away, it won't be counted. So that's not even the issue. But the issue about protecting of our party offices, the issue about individuals, we are going to Techiman for a rally and I'm going with some young man who make sure that I go and come back. These are the people that the police should be talking about. But it shouldn't develop into armed groups. If there are armed groups, the police have to disarm armed groups. We always have people protecting our party offices from the very beginning. And these are young men. Sometimes they are actually trained just to be alert and you see, particularly around this time that we are selecting candidates, a lot of people bring their supporters to party offices, particularly if they are being selected or they have a problem. And they kind of make noise and somebody has to be there to make sure that they go by. You don't always call police to your party office. If you do that, nobody will take you serious. Every time you are calling police. So you have young men who will make sure that they speak. That's all. And if any of these groups want to go beyond this type of thing, then it is the police that have to come in and make sure that vigilante groups, when we talk about vigilante group, doesn't mean they are armed. No, that one is not allowed. And shouldn't be allowed whether it's a party in power or party in opposition. But you cannot stop young men from protecting politicians across the board. So I think that what the doctor said, that the people, there should be dialogue. They should be talked to. I know the police have started. They have gone to our regional offices all over. And I think that with the dialogue and talking to our people and making sure it is stick and carrot. Carrot, when we talk, look, this is what your limits are, this is what you are supposed to be doing, you are not supposed to be using arms and firing or keeping arms in your party office, you are not supposed to be doing that one. But you are supposed to make sure that there is peace in the party office, and people like you see how tall I am. I always want taller people to be with me when I'm you cannot call him vigilante. They don't really, but the profession qualifies to be a macho man. So we should know the limits, and the police must do a little more than what we have said now. And I think they are on the right path. They have started, and the debate and the dialogue must continue. Thank you very much. No,
Azoka is a regional chairman of our party. Yeah. He exists. He's not in the bush in Aguna Biako, training mercenaries. He's not in Aguna Biako training mercenaries. He's in Tamale. If you go and find Azoka there. He's a regional chairman of the party. And when he moves with party supporters. If you call that vigilanteism, because there's a word like that, for us as a political party, we don't accept it. But we agree and respect the police service. If they can identify vigilante groups and deal with them, so be it. So be it. In principle, we agree. But if you call us up and he says, Oga Boys. Who was Oga Boys? The boys who go with you. I'm here with my deputy organizer. I also move around with people. Does that mean that I lead the vigilante group? The people who are doing the vigilantes are the people who are not here. They are in Angola, Biafra, or they are on a South Africa bound airline sending their mercenaries back to South Africa. Those are the people that you must be dealing with. And I'm referring to the NPP. They are the ones who are busy trying to create confusion in this country. And I say it unreservedly.
Next week, we are going on outreach, and one of the major documents we are taking along is the CI, so that people will know their responsibilities before, during, and after elections. Because if people know their responsibilities, they are not supposed to be hanging around when after voting. We don't say that to cause confusion. So, peaceful election is very paramount and very in our minds. And it's about education. It's about educating your people and getting them on board, training them, as he said. We have a list of two, we take 5 or 6 agents so that people really know what they should be about. Because that's what makes peaceful election. The election, then the counting, then acceptance of the results. People should know that in an election, somebody wins and somebody loses. And nobody is destined to be president by always. It depends on the vote at the police station. And we can, so we are prepared. And next week you will hear of us all over the country doing that. But you see, unlike my brother here, I'm interested in efficiency. The prof should go back and do so Bolga Bulldogs and invisible forces, Azoka boys and Baba boys. Are they the same group? But some people are stationed and uniformed. Some people move groups when they are going for. You know, if you don't define it well, even confusion between some parties go and fight among themselves. And no parties where police have to go and throw check and they are fighting among themselves. Those fighting are they vigilantes? Is it everybody who takes the law into his hand in a meeting that's a vigilante? What is a vigilante? If for this conversation to continue, if you don't define it properly, it will look like any wrongdoing is called vigilante. And to confuse the police has to work.
Be able to disband these political vigilante groups before November's polls?
Definitely we will, and we are already in the process. The Inspector General of Police has made it clear that vigilante groups are not legitimate groups, but we are using multiple approaches. You understand? We cannot just use one approach, face them with any kind of force. We can as well do that, but sometimes education is superior to some of these things. You can talk people out of it. There are motivations for a lot of things. We have spoken with them. I told you the Inspector General of Police or the police service has come out with a report identifying the causes and other things. And as a result, we are also working on the recommendations.
Okay, so
one of the recommendations, let me land, one of the recommendations is the fact that we should use a pacific approach.
And what does that mean?
That is the kind of dialogue that the IGP is doing. Now he has set in motion the dialogue series where we are meeting political parties who, in one way or the other, are associated with some of these vigilante groups, if not all of them. And so we have spoken to them, we are continuing the process, but even along the line, you see that a few days ago, some arrests were made. It doesn't mean that we are going to restrict ourselves to that pacific approach. As and when things go bad, we will do an arrest, we will put people before court, and that's what the security agencies are going to do. And this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning, and it's going to continue.
So we are clear on this particular issue.
Yes.
The only arrests you made are South Africans who have left the country. Isn't it so?
Is that the only arrest you heard of?
Yes.
I hope you heard of other arrests.
Captain Koda and Captain Aqua.
I hope you heard of other arrests.
Yes,
and that is it.
Are you making reference
so
to them?
I'm saying that we made some arrests, and that's just the beginning. And we will continue in that.
I mean, the charges against Captain Koda and Aqua has been dropped. The South Africans are out of the country.
My brother, I'm saying that this is just the beginning. So we are using multiple approaches, and that is just the beginning. We'll continue in that process, and I can assure you that before the election, these groups will be disbanded completely.
But surprisingly, I mean, this looks like a new group. You've always had people...
Which group is new?
I'm talking about those you recently arrested. I mean, you've always had the Bamba boys in the country. You've always had the Azoka boys in the country.
Yes.
You've not had the temerity as a security institution to arrest these people.
And who says we are not working on that? We are working
But
on
what does
that.
it
I've
take to
told
arrest
you.
these people?
Listen to me. I've told you that we have done extensive investigation into it, and we have identified them, and we are putting in place a mechanism to deal with it. That's it.
Forgive me, but this sounds like the usual police talk. What people would really want to see is that
Yes.
we have a roadmap. By this particular date, we would have flashed out all of these groups.
And
Who
who gave you the roadmap? Who gave you the roadmap? Did you set your own roadmap, or police gave you a roadmap?
I'm saying that
we have
that's
our
what
own.
people
Hold
expect the
on,
police to
hold on.
say.
We have our roadmap, and we are saying before election they will all be disbanded. And we have multiple approaches, and I've told you about it. We are holding dialogue with them, and that's the first one. Education is the most superior tool. Education is most superior tool. You can go and make all the arrests in this world. It may not end up, solving the problem. But when you educate people as to the nature of these things, the effect of those things on society, on themselves, and they appreciate it, and then you use the other tool when it becomes necessary, that is the way forward. And that is what the IGP is doing.
How many political vigilante groups are there in the country today?
They are in their numbers, and we have identified them. I
But give me the specific number.
I can tell you if
Because
I make
you have a
reference.
report.
Yes, I cannot be referring to report when I'm talking to you now, but I know the numbers, and they are reflected in us. Some of them come and go. Some of them just come and fizzle out, okay? Some of them are not sustainable because they just come up and then they just fizzle out. Others are there, and they've been there for some time now, okay? And we can easily identify them, and we are working on them. That's it.
You told me about causes.
Yes.
Is the lack of trust political parties have in the security institutions like yours one of these causes?
People have a lot of motivations for this, okay? And I'm not here to go into those things. What is important for now is that we are dealing with the issues, and we are going to get to the root of those issues.
So you are dealing with the lack of trust for security.
I didn't mention trust. I say, I
know that's
told
an
you,
issue, right?
I told you that we are dealing with the issue of vigilantism, and then by the end of the before the election, we'll be ensuring that they are all flushed out. That's it. That's what the IG said, and that's what we are working on. Then that's the roadmap we have.
There's a question that Dr. Atukwefe raised.
Yes.
He's saying that don't be too quick to disband these political groups. I mean, you should rather choose the alternative of one, working on the reputation that people have of the institution, two, of dialoguing deeper with them. You responded that you've already started some dialogue with them. But I know in my very young life that the police have always engaged political parties ahead of elections. But still, these groupings spearhead most of the activities that end up in violent clashes across the country. How else are you going to do the dialogue differently this time around?
Let me tell you this. Maybe you've not been following. Police have already held discussions, dialogue with the youth. Hold on. The youth groups of all the political parties.
I'm aware of that.
We've been holding talks with them, but this time around we centered solely on vigilantism, okay? And they themselves come out, they talk. You see, the best way to solve problem is to listen to other people. And when you listen to their views, then you are able to proffer solutions or to assist them resolve the issue or solve the problems. Now, if we take a unilateral stand by saying that this is the way forward, we may miss the point. That is why we have instituted the dialogue series where we are listening to them. And after listening to all of them, then together, it's a collective responsibility. It is not, police cannot say that they alone, as an institution, can just end this, okay, can flush this out. We will count on the members of the public, we will count on other institutions, we will count on the media, and we will count on the political parties themselves. And this is what we are doing. It should not be something that you should expect that it should just end immediately. No, it's a process. Remember, it developed through a process. And therefore, ending it, if you don't end it in a procedural manner, it will end up just resurfacing.
Okay, my last question is, since the IGP announced that we would root out these political vigilante groups, we would disband them, how many has been disbanded so far?
I thought you asked this question already. You are just repeating.
The question I asked early on was whether I could give me a list of them Is this thing?
My brother,
Yeah.
the IGP made a firm statement that we will disband them. How many weeks ago did he make that statement? So you will not expect that within a span of 1 month, they are all disbanded.
I'm just asking how many are...
So I'm saying that we are in the process.
Does
And
that mean none has been disbanded so far?
I'm saying we are in the process. We are in the process of doing that.
Explain that process to me. I mean,
And the process is what I've already told you. That look, we are meeting all the stakeholders involved in this. You are making me just repeat myself.
no, but I get the point. But I was expecting that you could tell me that since
you
we
will-
started
you
the
will not
process,
hear-
we've
you-
only been able to disband 1, 2, 3.
No.
at least 4.
I said we are in the process. Because
Process of doing what? Talking to them?
The process is the dialogue, meeting the stakeholders, talking to them, getting to the root of all this, and then together we
Okay, so
work
the
on
actual
it.
dissolution has not started yet.
I have not said that. I'm only telling you that we are in the process. And the process is a beginning. And so it has started.
Look, I understand.
Once
the
you
point-
take
I
a
understand the
step,
political,
hold on,
but
hold on.
You're not being helpful to me with this particular one.
No.
I just want
Maybe
to know whether you've been
you want to
successful.
you want to satisfy yourself
No, I just want
by
to know
making me
whether you've
make a statement that will satisfy
You've been successful
you.
in actually dissolving a single grouping. That's all I want to know.
And I've also told you that the IGP made this statement just a month ago or so, and you don't expect that within that period every vigilante group is disbanded.
I'm not talking about every vigilante group. I'm asking whether you maybe to disband at least one.
I said we have started a process, and the process is not ending now. So
Look,
you don't expect it to
I
end now.
appreciate your-
So I will not make
Sorry,
a firm statement on this.
I hear you.
Political parties have pledged to support the police in its renewed efforts to disband vigilante groups across the country as a major step to ensuring a peaceful election in November.